How inmates are transferred to Pelican Bay State Prison, secrets behind California's toughest moves. Pelican Bay State Prison sits at the edge of California's northern wilderness, isolated, cold, and unforgiving. It's the kind of place built not just to hold people, but to contain the ones the system considers the most dangerous, the most organized, and the most influential. But here's the real mystery: how does someone actually get transferred into Pelican Bay? It's not random, and it's not simple. There's a hidden pipeline, a chain of decisions, classifications, escorts, and security protocols that most people never see. Today, we're pulling back that curtain.
Before we dive into today's powerful story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping tales. Your support helps us keep sharing these stories, and we wouldn't want you to miss any of the action. Now, let's get started.
What makes Pelican Bay different? Pelican Bay State Prison opened in 1989, purpose-built for what the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, calls the worst of the worst. That phrase has appeared repeatedly in coverage of the facility, but the reality is more structured than it sounds. The prison houses Level 4 inmates, the highest security classification in the state, along with individuals who, according to CDCR policies, demonstrate ongoing threats to institutional safety or broader criminal networks. Pelican Bay was also home to California's most notorious security housing unit, SHU, where alleged prison gang members were once held in long-term isolation. While major policy shifts after 2015 reduced indefinite SHU confinement, Pelican Bay still functions as a hub for high-risk management. So when someone ends up here, it's not an accident. It's the result of a formal process, decided long before the transport van ever hits the road. Who decides an inmate should be sent to Pelican Bay? Transfers into Pelican Bay don't start with a guard or a warden. They start with an institutional classification committee, usually called the ICC. This group typically includes correctional counselors, associate wardens, and sometimes psychologists, depending on the case. The ICC evaluates the inmates' security level, disciplinary history, gang affiliation status, if any, and if documented, behavior patterns, past violence or escape attempts, medical and mental health needs. Each factor ties into the California Code of Regulations Title 15, which outlines how inmates are assigned custody levels and which prisons are suitable for them. For Pelican Bay specifically, the criteria often center on whether an inmate requires maximum security housing, enhanced supervision, or placement in facilities equipped for validated prison gang members or high-risk individuals. Validation procedures, the method CDCR used to determine gang affiliation, were the subject of lawsuits and reforms, particularly between 2012 and 2015. After those changes, the state revised how inmates are designated and when the SHU can be used. Still, Pelican Bay remains a destination for individuals classified as high security or high control needs. Once the ICC makes a decision, the paperwork doesn't go straight to Pelican Bay. It goes to CDCR's Centralized Population Management Unit, CPMU, which evaluates transfers across the entire state system. They match inmates to specific beds at specific institutions. If Pelican Bay has a suitable opening, and the criteria fit, the transfer gets scheduled. The surprising role of bed space. A strange reality of prison transfers: even the most dangerous inmates don't move anywhere unless there's an open bed. CDCR maintains a constantly shifting population. People parole out, complete SHU terms, or get transferred elsewhere for medical or mental health treatment. When a Level 4 cell opens at Pelican Bay, especially one in a high-control unit, that slot becomes available. The CPMU then starts matching incoming candidates based on urgency and classification. Sometimes transfers are immediate, when there's a serious security concern at the inmate's current location. Scheduled, when part of routine population balancing. Delayed, if the inmate has pending court dates, medical restrictions, or disciplinary hearings. This part of the process is one of the least public and least documented. Most information comes from state audits, court filings, and statements in news coverage following major incidents. But one thing is consistently clear: nobody gets sent to Pelican Bay unless the system decides there's no better place for them. PRE transfer preparation: what happens before the move? This is the stage nobody really hears about, but it's where the transfer actually becomes real. 1. Paperwork verification. Before any inmate is approved for movement, classification scores are verified. Disciplinary records are updated. Medical staff review fitness for transport. Mental health levels are logged. CDCR uses a mental health delivery system with categories from 1 to 5. Any legal holds are checked to ensure the inmate doesn't have an upcoming court appearance that prohibits transfer. Medical and mental health status matter a lot. Pelican Bay doesn't house every category of patient, so some inmates, even violent ones, can't be transferred if they require specialized care only available elsewhere. 2. Property audit. CDCR limits what property inmates can transfer with. Staff inventory. Legal documents. Authorized personal items. Clothing. Commissary purchases. Photos and letters. Anything not permitted by Pelican Bay's property rules is stored, mailed out, or destroyed depending on policy. 3. Security assessment. This part determines how the inmate will travel. High-risk escorts report directly to transportation officers. Inmates affiliated with known rival groups may require staggered departure times. Escape risk inmates get additional restraints. These assessments are documented but not always publicly accessible. Much of what is known comes from use of force reviews, state inspections, and court disclosures. 4. Notification protocols. Depending on the inmate's custody status, CDCR may inform receiving institutions, update internal tracking databases, notify allied agencies if the inmate has pending cases. In most cases, inmates themselves receive short notice. That's partly to prevent last-minute disturbances or attempts to resist transfer. The day of the transfer. Transfers usually happen early in the morning, sometimes before sunrise, to reduce risks and avoid drawing attention inside the yard. What happens next is highly structured, adjusted depending on whether the inmate is considered standard level 4 or high risk. Stage 1. Removal from housing unit. Officers arrive at the inmate's door with a sergeant, at least one escort officer, sometimes a second officer depending on custody level. The inmate is ordered to cuff up through the food port. Once secure, they're removed from the cell and placed in restraints. Waist chains, handcuffs, leg irons, if required by classification. Black box handcuff covers, for high-risk moves. Every action is documented in a movement log. Stage 2, pre-transport holding. Inmates wait in a designated area until the entire transport roster is assembled. Officers check identity, classification, restraint security, transport paperwork, property items allowed for the move, medical clearance documents. This stage is one of the most regulated and includes multiple sign-offs. Stage 3, escort to transport vehicle. CDCR uses multiple types of vehicles. Secure vans. Buses outfitted with steel barriers. High-security transport units for the most dangerous individuals. The exact composition of the escort team varies. For high-risk inmates, documentation shows the presence of armed officers, chase vehicles, and specialized transport teams. For standard level 4 inmates, the escort is simpler but still heavily controlled. Once loaded, inmates are physically separated inside the vehicle to prevent violence during transport. Stage 4, departure. Transports typically travel with planned stops through designated routes. Under strict radio communication. Without public disclosure of timing or direction. Pelican Bay's remote location, near Crescent City, means some transfers take 9 to 14 hours by road depending on the starting institution. The journey to the edge of California. Most prisons in California are located in the Central Valley or Southern California, areas surrounded by farmland, highways, or industrial zones. Pelican Bay is different. It sits near the Oregon border, surrounded by redwood forests and rugged coastline. That distance isn't an accident, it's part of the design. For many inmates, the journey to Pelican Bay is one of the longest they will ever take inside the California prison system. The route. The specific routes used for transfers are not publicly disclosed for safety reasons. However, publicly available transportation audits, court filings, and news coverage following incidents confirm a few consistent features. The route is pre-planned, with preferred highways noted. CDCR transport officers maintain continuous radio communication with regional dispatch. Stops are limited to controlled or pre-approved locations. Transport teams often work in rotating shifts for long-distance drives. Most transports heading north eventually take Highway 101, the long, winding coastal highway leading to Del Norte County. In poor weather conditions, this road becomes even more challenging, but it remains the primary corridor. The total duration of the trip depends on departure point. From Los Angeles, the drive can exceed 14 hours. From the Central Valley, it's often 8 to 10 hours. Northern facilities like High Desert State Prison can reach Pelican Bay in as little as 3 to 4 hours. Regardless of departure point, the philosophy is the same: move quickly, move quietly, and minimize exposure to the public. Inside the transport vehicle. The interior of CDCR transport buses is divided by steel partitions. Inmates sit in segregated compartments depending on custody level, known conflicts, gang separations, behavioral histories. The restraints stay on for the entire trip unless medically required to be loosened. Transport officers sit in a raised area near the front of the bus. Their job is twofold. Monitor every movement inside the vehicle. Track external conditions, traffic, planned stops, and potential hazards. There are no unscheduled stops. Everything is timed and logged. Escape prevention protocols. CDCR's transportation rules, as described in state manuals and confirmed in audits, include the following. Officers must check restraints at scheduled intervals. Keys are secured in sealed pouches to prevent unauthorized access. The vehicle's rear and side exits are equipped with locks accessible only to staff. Windows are reinforced and do not open. For high-risk inmates, the transport may include an additional chase vehicle carrying armed officers. Escape attempts from CDCR prison transports are extremely rare compared to historical incidents in other states. When they have occurred, they have led to immediate policy reviews and increased security measures. The human reality of the drive. Despite the tight security, the drive can be physically draining. Transport buses are loud, cramped, and cold. In many court filings involving conditions of confinement, inmates describe long drives as one of the most exhausting parts of being moved within the system. But once the bus approaches Crescent City and the towering redwoods give way to concrete and razor wire, another phase begins, one even more tightly controlled than the journey itself. Arrival at Pelican Bay State Prison. Pelican Bay isn't just another maximum security prison. It was designed from the blueprint up to isolate, contain, and control high-risk individuals. Everything about the arrival process reflects that. The security perimeter. Before the transport vehicle even reaches the main gate, it passes through a controlled frontage area. Surveillance towers with armed officers. Perimeter fencing designed to detect climbing or tampering. Multiple camera angles covering all blind spots. Only after officers inside the control booth verify the transport's identity are the gates opened. The Sally Port. A Sally Port is a secure holding area where two gates never open at the same time. It's standard in high-security prisons across the U.S., but Pelican Bay's design is especially strict. Inside the Sally Port, the bus is immobilized. The exterior gate closes completely before the interior gate opens. Officers verify the transport log and confirm the number of inmates on board. At this stage, Pelican Bay staff formally take custody. First contact with receiving staff. Transport officers hand over identification documents, classification paperwork, medical clearance forms, property inventories, any special handling instructions. Pelican Bay's receiving team logs each item and double-checks the inmate's identity. The Receiving and Release Process, R&R. All CDCR prisons have an R&R department, but Pelican Bay's is designed for tightly controlled movement. Once inmates step off the bus, they are escorted in small groups or individually. Restraints remain on until staff secure the room. Inmates undergo a strip search conducted according to CDCR policy. Property is re-inventoried. Medical staff conduct an immediate health screening. The health screening is required by state policy and may include vital signs, questions about recent injuries, mental health status check, review of any pending medications. If the inmate exhibits symptoms that require urgent care, they may be routed to medical services before entering general processing. Documentation and orientation. Even at Pelican Bay, inmates must receive orientation materials. These include institutional rules, housing unit expectations, procedures for requests, grievances, and appeals. Information about programs, limited depending on custody level. This orientation does not mean inmates get full tours or interactions. Most of the information is delivered through printed materials or verbal briefings. Security reclassification, if required. Not all inmates keep the exact same classification once they arrive. Pelican Bay reviews. Custody level. Gang validation status, subject to post-2015 reforms. Recent disciplinary actions. Medical or mental health changes. Housing availability in specific units. This internal review determines where the inmate will be placed next: general population, restricted housing, administrative segregation, or, historically, the SHU. The final assignment, where inmates are actually housed. Pelican Bay has several major housing areas, each with a different purpose. The exact placement depends on the inmate's needs and security status. 1. General Population Level 4. Not every inmate at Pelican Bay is in isolation. Many are in Level 4 General Population Yards. These units operate under high security, limited movement, heavily supervised yard time, strict schedules. The majority of inmates will ultimately land here unless they have specific restrictions. 2. Administrative segregation, ADSEG. Some inmates arriving from other prisons require temporary solitary placement pending investigations, reclassification reviews, disciplinary hearings, safety concerns. ADSEG is not meant to be long-term housing, but stays can last weeks or months depending on the case. 3. The Security Housing Unit, SHU, historical and current context. Prior to major reforms in 2015, the SHU at Pelican Bay was known internationally for holding inmates in long-term isolation, often based on gang validation rather than specific violent acts. After the Ashker v. Brown settlement, CDCR changed its policies. Indefinite SHU terms for gang validation ended. Many inmates were released to general population or transferred to other facilities. The SHU remains but is used differently, primarily for inmates with demonstrated violent behavior or severe disciplinary issues. Important, the exact criteria for placement have changed over time. Much of the historical SHU system no longer exists as it did before 2015. 4. Specialized units. Pelican Bay, like other high-security prisons, also houses mental health treatment spaces, medical holding areas, restricted programming units. These placements depend entirely on documented need. Once assigned, the inmate is escorted to their new unit. The arrival is typically silent, quick, and controlled. Every step, from the main gate to the cell door, is monitored by staff, cameras, or both. Life after transfer: what changes inside Pelican Bay? For inmates, the biggest shift after arriving at Pelican Bay isn't the drive or the paperwork, it's the daily reality of living in one of California's most controlled environments. Movement and surveillance. Pelican Bay's design limits inmate movement more than almost any other state facility. In most units, movement outside the cell happens only under escort. Yard time is scheduled, supervised, and heavily monitored. Every area is under camera coverage or direct officer observation. This structure stems from decades of documented violence, gang influence, and organized activity in the state's prison system. Gang management and security intelligence. Gang activity, historically a key reason inmates were transferred here, remains a major focus, though the procedures have changed post-2015. Staff use. Documented behavior. Communication monitoring. Intelligence reports. Incident reviews. To assess ongoing threats. The older gang validation system is no longer used in the same way, but monitoring remains central to facility security. Program access and limitations. Depending on an inmate's housing assignment, programs may be limited, highly structured, delivered inside restricted spaces. Higher-risk units receive fewer group programs, while general population yards have more access. Mental health and medical care. Pelican Bay isn't designed as a medical hub. If an arriving inmate's health needs exceed what the prison can provide, CDCR policies require transfer to facilities equipped for higher levels of care. This can lead to additional movement shortly after arrival. The psychological shift. For many inmates, especially those coming from lower security environments, Pelican Bay represents a dramatic tightening of control. Court filings and interviews over the years describe reduced social interaction, strict routines, long hours inside the cell, heightened tension between rival groups due to close proximity and long histories. It's a place built to contain influence, not rehabilitate it. Closing thoughts: why this process matters. Pelican Bay isn't just a prison, it's a system within a system. And every transfer into it represents dozens of decisions made across miles of bureaucracy. Classification committees. Population management units. Medical clearance. Transport logistics. Security teams. Receiving staff. Housing review boards. None of it is random. None of it is casual. And almost none of it is visible to the public. The journey to Pelican Bay is the story of how California manages its highest-risk inmates, not through sensational tactics or dramatic events, but through layers of policy, procedure, and controlled movement. In a state system that supervises tens of thousands of people, Pelican Bay remains the endpoint for a small, carefully selected group. The isolation, the security, and the remoteness all serve one purpose: to contain individuals whose presence elsewhere could destabilize entire prisons. And that's the real secret of the transfer pipeline, not hidden convoys or mystery tactics, but a system designed to make sure only those who truly meet the criteria ever reach the end of that long road through the redwoods. If you found this breakdown helpful and want more deep dives into how the prison system actually works behind the headlines, consider sticking around for the next episode. Thanks for watching, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.